ISS alert. Soyuz rocket failure. What went wrong and what happens next? After a successful emergency abort, 2 men are now safe, but what about the vehicle that failed them? Chelsea Goad on Astronomy reports on this. This happens because of the Soyuz launch failure. An anomaly occurred as a Soyuz spacecraft carrying 2 astronauts launched towards the International Space Station from the Russian Baikonur Cosmodrome, which is in Kazakhstan. This happened on Thursday. The crew had to abort, and thank goodness they're safe. But it could have been a real disaster because of this launch failure. 2 astronauts made an emergency landing in Kazakhstan after a Russian Soyuz rocket failed at launch while launching them into the International Space Station. According to NASA officials, the rocket failed in its ascent soon after liftoff, and the capsule with the astronauts inside, 1 Russian and 1 American, was sent careening back to Earth. A search and rescue team reached the site quickly to get the Soyuz MS-10 crew out, leaving a 6:10 a.m. EDT, according to NASA spokesperson Brandy Dean's commentary on live television. Both crew members are safe and in good condition and have already been reunited with their families. Now, the Soyuz FG rocket used in the launch malfunctioned 2 minutes after liftoff from Kazakhstan. The failure forced Russian cosmonaut Alexei Ovchinin and NASA astronaut Nick Hague to execute an emergency abort and return a few hundred miles to the launch site. Quote, "Today showed again what an amazing vehicle the Soyuz is to be able to save the crew from such a failure. Space flight is hard and we must keep trying for the benefit of humankind." End quote. ESA astronaut Alexander Gerst tweeted from aboard the ISS space station, and he tweeted this as he watched and photographed the launch from space. So he was the one that got images of the launch failure as well. He also tweeted, "Glad our friends are fine. Thanks to the rescue force of 1,000 SAR professionals, today showed again what an amazing vehicle the Soyuz is to be able to save the crew from such a failure. Space flight is hard and we must keep trying for the benefit of mankind." This is what he tweeted on October 11. After the crew successfully navigated the failure and landed safely, they boarded a plane to fly back to the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Now, as we know, US depends on Russian rockets because that's how the US astronauts get to the ISS. It's always the Russians that are taking them, bringing them to the ISS space station and also bringing them back to Earth. This failure comes as the US is working to wean itself off its Russian rocket dependency. For many years since NASA's final shuttle mission in 2011, the US relied on Russian rockets to send astronauts to the International Space Station, which is largely funded by American taxpayer dollars. Now American companies, SpaceX and Boeing, are working to launch their first crewed missions into space. The missions both hope to launch next year, 2019, although they have each experienced delays thus far because they have had failures of their own. These will be the first crewed missions to launch from America's soil since 2011, while the issues with Soyuz MS-10 mission will likely be resolved by then. This will allow for increased access to space and reduced dependency. Well, my big question is, we know that NASA and the American technology landed man on the moon. Why does the US have to rely on a foreign country, a country that it deems its major enemy, bringing their astronauts to the International Space Station? That's a question I hope somebody will be able to answer for me. Investigating now this mishap, NASA and Roscosmos officials say they're launching an investigation into what went wrong with the rocket and why. Quote, "A thorough investigation into the cause of the incident will be conducted," end quote. This is what NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine tweeted alongside an official statement on the Soyuz MS-10 launch abort. The officials are also probing the strange hole recently found in the Soyuz spacecraft aboard the International Space Station. Remember that hole? That's the air leak that they had a couple of months back. And the Russians found that the hole was made from the inside towards the out. So in other words, it was intentional. It was somebody on the ISS already that made the hole from the inside out. And of course, that was a danger to all on board the ISS. So why that was we still don't have any news about that. We don't. That's a big question. I have not seen anything on that. I'll look into it again, but we still don't know who could have done that. That was intentional. So now the historical perspective: while Soyuz rockets considered reliable launch vehicles in the space sector, this is not the first failure the Soyuz program had in history. In 1967, the Soyuz 1 spacecraft, which carried the same name as its launch vehicle, had a parachute failure during its first crewed mission and crashed, resulting in the death of cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov. Also, including today, there have been 3 total failed launches of crewed Soyuz vehicles in 1975, 1983, and the one that happened on August 11th. So, wow, since 1967, they only had 4 mishaps in all these years. Still, these failures have been few and far between. Historically, failures have plagued many launch vehicles. SpaceX, for example, has had a number of mishaps. 2015, CRS-7 launched a Dragon capsule on a Falcon 9 rocket and resupply the space station, but the second stage exploded and Falcon 9 exploded later in 2016 before it even launched. Luckily, there were no astronauts on these to be harmed, as none of these missions have been crewed. But these failures have been difficult learning experiences for the company, which plans to launch its first crewed capsule next year. NASA has also suffered a number of launch failures over the years. The United States' first attempt to launch a satellite into orbit ended in failure and explosion. Additionally, crewless test flights from Saturn V rocket in anticipation for the crewed Apollo 6 mission failed to complete its mission. The Challenger disaster killed all 7 astronauts on board, as did the Columbia disaster.